Have you ever created a dungeon entrance that was so awful the players wouldn't go in? I have. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. I'm going to talk about two dungeon entrances that I've created in the past that each have interesting little problems. The first one is the simplest one to describe. And this one, I can't remember if I'd actually seen the movie Desperado or not. But the party is chasing this character, and he's running, and he runs across toward this. There's an outhouse sitting out in the field, and he runs into the outhouse, slams the door, and the party runs in, and there the seat has been lifted up, and they look down, and they see the deep footprints of the character as there's a passageway off down in the bottom of the outhouse. The party refused to go after the character, which to me was sort of humorous because you're role playing and these are characters and you're trying to catch the bad guy, and the bad guy jumped down an outhouse. Makes me think of the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where the main character manages to escape by going through a sewer pipe and getting out. But the party wouldn't go after it. Okay, that one's an easy one. I just didn't realize that sometimes players were so wrapped up with their characters they couldn't imagine them getting that icky, shall we say. The other one goes way back, and this was probably after first edition came out. And for those of you who are unaware, one of the major changes between original Dungeons and Dragons and first edition was the changes to the way alignment worked. In original Dungeons and Dragons, in the first three books, there's three alignments. There's law, order, and neutral. There is no concept of good or evil. That was introduced starting with Greyhawk, and Eldritch Wizardry added more of that. But it still wasn't fleshed out like it was in the first edition. That was Gygax doing that. And I still think he was mistaken. And for those of you, I'm not really a fan of Gygax, though he's passed on. But I was reading through something, and it's one of the early books, and there was this idea about one-way doors that only open for a certain race or alignment, I think is the way it was worded. So I took that and ran with it, and I can't find, sorry, because of the move, the actual map I had of this, but it was really kind of nasty. Imagine Stonehenge. You have two rows of large arches, and there is some sort of altar in the center. And the party hears about something, and so they march up to this. Well, the outer row of arches, there's 18 arches. And or archways, I guess is the best way to describe it. 18 archways. Half of them do nothing. Half of them will teleport a particular alignment. So you come up to an archway, and if you walk through the archway, you may get teleported to someplace in the dungeon, and only those of your alignment will go with you if they walk through that archway. Yeah, we'll talk about what the ramifications of this one was. Then the second inner circle, which has fewer archways, and I can't remember. And this is very old. So there weren't as many races as we have today with all the different races. So there were fewer archways, and half of the archways didn't do anything, and the other half of the archways, depending upon what race you were, it teleported you to someplace else in the dungeon. Yeah. Then you get to the very center, and there's an altar there, and the inscription is you have to have a human sacrifice, and the implication is it has to be a player character. You must do a human sacrifice to be teleported into the dungeon. Yes, this is a, shall we say, awful, awful entrance. It splits the party. Normally you want to have, you want to have different kind of races, different kind of classes to balance out your party. No, this just totally takes it the bad way. I took an idea that sounded interesting and went with it. I do remember, though it did cause some hilarity. This is an entrance where one of the characters walk through. He gets teleported into a random location in the dungeon. And the first thing he runs into is 12 relatively high-level thieves. This is back first edition. So the thieves decide to just, we won't kill you. We'll just take everything you have, including your clothing. They bind him up loosely and leave a poor dagger there. And so here he is, naked, tied up. He manages to get loose, and he has a dagger. That's all. No shoes, no clothes, no nothing. It was interesting to see a character try and figure out how to survive in the dungeon with nothing. He managed to survive a little bit. I remember there was the one about it. He says, okay, I got the dagger. I come to the door. Is the door wood? Yes. So I take the door off its hinges. So I've got the door. I want to cut the door in half. So I've got half of a door. There was a little bit of rope that they tied me up. Can I build a handle? So now I've got a shield, which is half a door and a dagger. Yes, that was hilarious, dealing with a character where trying to be creative in how to do this. But this is, never split up the party. But what happens if the dungeon master does that? I mean, that's sort of, or the game master. It was a interesting learning adventure that nobody liked that particular entrance, with good cause. Because unless you were lucky, the party, got totally split up, and then to get to the entrance through the main entrance, you had to sacrifice one of your player characters. But that goes back to one of the differences between original Dungeons & Dragons in first edition and the later editions. Today we hear about, you have to have a session 0 to create your player characters because it's such a challenge to create a character. I'm back from the original Dungeons & Dragons where you rolled 3 sets of dice 6 times. Three dice 6 times. And in order, and that was your character. Then you rolled a hit points depending upon what class you picked of it. There, and the equipment, you didn't have much money, so you didn't have much equipment and so on. And that's the way you started a first level character. Today, it is so complicated to create a character that you almost need a tool, which is why D&D Beyond exists. But I have, there was some advantage to the simplicity that rolling up a new character was easier. So if the DM says you got to sacrifice a player character, that was not as onerous a task as it is today. But I admit that these were two, shall we say, awful, awful dungeon entrances that I would never use again today. And that's a lesson I've learned. So what is the worst dungeon entrance you've seen? An entrance that turned you off the dungeon, like the outhouse. You didn't want to go traipsing through, outhouse. Or what was something that the DM did that was so horrible to the party, like splitting it up by race and by class, by race and by alignment. that you would never want to do those dungeons and go through those entrances again. Like to hear those kind of stories. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.